My name is Marisa. I'm 28 years old, and right now I'm standing in my childhood home at 3 in the morning, clutching a duffel bag, while my family sleeps peacefully upstairs. I just discovered the truth about my inheritance that shattered everything I believed about family. My sister Bethany received $45,000 while I got $4,000. But the money wasn't what broke me. It was overhearing my parents toast Bethany as their greatest achievement, while calling me the one who never quite measured up. As I slip out the door into the darkness, I realize this betrayal runs much deeper than dollars and cents. Before I share what happened, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I finally found my worth. Let me take you back to where this painful journey began, to a family celebration that would reveal just how little I meant to the people who were supposed to love me most. 2 weeks before that 3 a.m. escape, I arrived at my parents' house for their 35th wedding anniversary celebration. I'd spent weeks creating handmade decorations, each piece crafted with love and attention to detail. The photo collages showcasing their journey together, the hand-painted banner with their wedding date, the centerpieces featuring miniature recreations of their wedding flowers. As a graphic designer who owned my own small business, I poured my professional skills into making their day special. I arrived early to set everything up, transforming their backyard into a romantic wonderland. Then Bethany swept in 2 hours late with a grocery store bouquet and a card she probably grabbed from the gas station. My mother, Grace, practically glowed as she gushed over the $12 roses like they were made of gold. "Oh, Bethany, you always know exactly what I love. So thoughtful of you to take time from your busy schedule." My father, Robert, chimed in. "Our lawyer daughter always thinking of others even with such important cases." I stood there surrounded by hundreds of dollars worth of decorations I'd created, invisible as always. This wasn't new. Growing up, Bethany could do no wrong. She got C's in school while I maintained straight A's, yet parent-teacher conferences always focused on her potential rather than my achievements. When she barely passed the bar exam on her 3rd try, they threw a party. When I graduated summa cum laude with my design degree, they asked why I didn't go to law school like my sister. Every family gathering followed the same script. Bethany would share some mediocre accomplishment, and our parents would act like she'd cured cancer. During the anniversary dinner, the favoritism reached new heights. My mother stood up to give a toast, her eyes locked on Bethany. "We're so blessed to have such an accomplished daughter. Bethany has made us proud every single day, becoming the successful lawyer we always dreamed of. And Marisa," she paused, finally glancing my way. "Well, we're grateful Bethany inspired you to find your little creative hobby." A hobby. My business that supported me fully, that had won numerous design awards, that employed 3 other people, reduced to a hobby inspired by my sister, who had nothing to do with my career choice. The evening continued its predictable pattern. My father spent 20 minutes discussing Bethany's latest case, which, from what I could gather, involved filing basic paperwork for a real estate transaction. When my boyfriend Mitchell tried to mention that I'd just landed a contract with a Fortune 500 company, Robert cut him off. "That's nice, but did you hear about Bethany's new office corner suite with a view of the city?" Mitchell squeezed my hand under the table, his jaw tight with suppressed frustration. Derek, Bethany's husband, decided to pile on. "Must be nice not having real responsibilities, just playing with colors and shapes all day," he said, gesturing at me with his wine glass. "Not everyone can handle the pressure of actual professional work like Bethany." Before Mitchell could respond, Derek continued. "Speaking of which, when are you going to settle down? Marisa, tick-tock, you're not getting any younger. Bethany already gave our parents grandchildren to be proud of. They didn't have children yet, but apparently even hypothetical grandchildren from Bethany were worth more than my actual existence. My Aunt Diane watched this unfold with knowing eyes. She'd witnessed years of this treatment, but learned long ago that speaking up only made things worse. Other relatives shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the blatant favoritism, but choosing silence over confrontation. Even my cousin Janet, who'd privately told me how unfair it all was, stayed quiet when Grace launched into another story about Bethany's brilliance. As the night wore on, I realized something that would haunt me later. This wasn't just preference or personality differences. This was systematic devaluation of everything I was and everything I'd accomplished. Every achievement I'd earned through my own hard work was either dismissed or somehow credited to Bethany's influence. My successful business became possible because Bethany showed me the importance of work ethic. My design awards were luck. My financial independence was temporary until I found a husband like Derek to take care of me properly. Mitchell pulled me aside near the end of the evening. "This is abuse, Marisa. You know that, right? The way they treat you isn't normal." I'd grown so accustomed to being the family disappointment that I'd normalized their behavior. But seeing it through his eyes, watching him witness the casual cruelty disguised as family dynamics, something began to shift inside me. The decorations I'd lovingly created mocked me from every corner, physical reminders of my desperate attempts to earn love that was freely given to my sister. As we prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside. "Try not to be so sensitive about everything. We love both our daughters equally. If you feel overlooked, maybe examine why you're so needy for attention." The gaslight burned bright as always. My request for basic recognition transformed into character flaws. My hurt became oversensitivity. My accomplishments became attention-seeking behavior. I drove home that night with Mitchell in silence, not knowing that within 2 weeks, I'd be driving away from that house forever. The seeds of my 3 a.m. departure were already planted, watered by years of being told I wasn't enough while watching my sister receive praise for simply existing. But the inheritance revelation would be the flood that finally washed away my last hopes of earning my place in this family. 3 months before the anniversary party, my grandmother passed away after a long battle with heart disease. While Bethany visited her twice during that final year, claiming her busy law practice prevented more frequent visits, I spent every weekend at grandmother's house. I held her hand through chemotherapy appointments, organized her medications, cooked her favorite meals when she could barely eat, and listened to her stories about the old country. She'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "You have the kindest heart, Marisa. Never let anyone dim your light." Those words would echo in my mind during what came next. The will reading was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon at my parents' house rather than a lawyer's office, which should have been my first red flag. My parents said they wanted to keep things informal and family-oriented. Bethany arrived in her power suit, Derek by her side, while I came straight from a client meeting, portfolio bag still slung over my shoulder. We gathered in the living room, the same space where years of favoritism had played out during countless family gatherings. My father cleared his throat, playing the role of executor. Mother left specific instructions about her estate. She wanted to ensure both granddaughters were taken care of. He produced a document that looked official enough, though something felt off about the entire presentation. "Bethany, grandmother left you $20,000 to help with your future endeavors." Bethany nodded graciously as if she'd expected nothing less. "And Marisa," he continued, his tone shifting slightly, "grandmother left you $4,000. The disparity hit me like a physical blow. I'd been her caregiver, her companion, her support system while Bethany couldn't even remember her birthday. But before I could process this inequity, my mother chimed in with what they clearly thought was generosity. "Your father and I have decided to supplement what grandmother left," Grace announced, her voice dripping with false magnanimity. "We're giving Bethany an additional $25,000 to help with her house renovation. She and Derek need to create a proper home for their future family. $45,000 total for the absent granddaughter. $4,000 for the one who'd held grandmother's hand as she took her last breath." The justifications came quickly, a well-rehearsed symphony of excuses. "Bethany needs it more," my mother explained. "She has a mortgage, a career that demands a certain image, social obligations. You're single renting, and your little business doesn't have the same financial demands." My little business that grossed more than Bethany's salary last year, but facts had never mattered in this family's narrative. "You should be grateful for what you received," my father added, his tone suggesting I was being greedy for even noticing the disparity. "Not everything is about money. You got to spend time with grandmother, isn't that worth more than dollars?" The manipulation was breathtaking. My caregiving reduced to a privilege I should pay for with financial sacrifice. But the revelations were just beginning. Grace casually mentioned that Bethany would also inherit grandmother's jewelry collection, including the pearl necklace grandmother had worn at her wedding and promised to me when I was 7 years old. Bethany's the eldest and she's married. The family heirlooms should go to someone who can properly pass them down to the next generation. My single status apparently disqualified me from family history, along with fair treatment. That evening, Aunt Diane pulled me aside at the coffee shop down the street. She'd requested a private conversation, her face grave with long-held secrets. "There's something you need to know," she began, her hands wrapped around her cup for comfort. "Your parents have been financially supporting Bethany for years, in ways you never knew about." The truth came in waves, each revelation more shocking than the last. My parents had quietly paid off Bethany's law school loans, all $60,000, while I worked 3 jobs to pay my tuition. They'd covered her credit card debt multiple times, blaming her financial irresponsibility on the pressures of law school and early career development. When Bethany wanted a luxury car to impress clients, they'd co-sign the loan and made payments when she couldn't. "But that's not the worst part," Diane continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Your grandmother's original will was very different. She planned to leave you her house knowing how much you loved it and how you'd cared for her. But your parents convinced her to change it, telling her you were too irresponsible to handle property ownership. They said you'd probably sell it to fund your unstable artistic lifestyle." The betrayal cut deeper than any financial disparity. They'd actively sabotaged my inheritance, painting me as reckless to my dying grandmother, while I spent every free moment caring for her. The house went to them instead, which they promptly sold, likely funding Bethany's latest financial rescue. My stomach churned as I realized the depth of their deception. Mitchell found me crying in my car an hour later, having tracked my location when I didn't answer my phone. As I told him everything, his face cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally a cold determination. "This ends now," he said firmly. "They've stolen from you, lied about you, and manipulated a dying woman. You don't owe them anything, Marisa. Not your time, not your love, and certainly not your silence." But I wasn't ready to walk away yet. Some desperate part of me still believed I could make them see me, make them value what I'd accomplished, make them love me the way they loved Bethany. That hope would die soon enough. But first, I had to confront them directly. I had to give them one last chance to choose me, to acknowledge the years of inequality, to show some small sign that I mattered. The next family dinner would shatter those illusions forever, revealing not just favoritism, but active sabotage that had shaped my entire life. The inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about a lifetime of being deemed worthless by the people who should have been my biggest supporters. And Bethany, my dear sister, wasn't just a passive beneficiary of this system. She was an active participant in my destruction. Armed with Aunt Diana's revelations, I requested a private meeting with my parents the following Sunday. I'd prepared carefully documenting the financial disparities, practicing calm responses to their inevitable deflections. Mitchell offered to come for support, but I needed to do this alone, to give them one final opportunity to acknowledge the truth, without outside witnesses to blame for my dramatics. I arrived at their house to find them in the formal dining room, seated like corporate executives ready to dismiss an unruly employee. The power dynamic was clear before I even spoke. Grace sat with her hands folded, her expression already tinged with impatience. Robert had his reading glasses on papers spread before him, as if my pain was a business matter to be efficiently handled. I need to discuss the inheritance situation. I began, proud of how steady my voice remained. The disparity between what Bethany received and what I got isn't just about grandmother's will. It's about a pattern of financial favoritism that goes back years. I laid out what I'd learned about the paid loans, the covered debts, the co-signed mortgage, watching their faces for any sign of remorse or recognition. Instead, my mother sighed dramatically. "You're being dramatic as usual, Marisa. Everything we've done has been to help both our daughters succeed. If Bethany needed more support, it's because her career path required it. Law school is expensive. Maintaining a professional image costs money. Your little art projects don't have the same requirements." The dismissal of my entire career as little art projects sparked anger I fought to control. My business earned 6 figures last year. I've never asked you for money, never needed bailouts, never required you to lie to dying relatives about my character. How is that worth less than Bethany barely scraping by despite constant financial support? Robert removed his glasses, his gesture calculated to convey paternal disappointment. "This jealousy is ugly, Marisa. We raised you better than this, counting other people's blessings, keeping score like a child. If you're struggling financially, perhaps you should examine your choices rather than blaming your sister's success." "I'm not struggling," I said through gritted teeth. "I'm hurt that you've systematically favored Bethany while actively sabotaging opportunities for me. You told grandmother I was irresponsible. When was I ever irresponsible? When I graduated with honors? When I built a business from nothing? When I spent every weekend caring for her while Bethany couldn't be bothered? That's when Grace delivered another blow. Since you're so concerned about fairness, you should know we also co-signed Bethany's mortgage. She and Derek needed help qualifying for their dream home. It's what families do for each other, Marisa. Support each other's dreams." The casual cruelty of that statement, knowing they'd refused to even consider co-signing a business loan when I'd asked years earlier, left me momentarily speechless. "You refused to help with my business expansion," I finally managed. "You said co-signing was too risky, that I should prove myself first." But Bethany's mortgage wasn't risky. Bethany has a stable career and a husband. 2 incomes, professional trajectories. Your business is just you playing with computers. It could fail tomorrow. The irony that my playing had produced more income than Bethany's stable career was lost on them, buried under years of willful blindness. As if summoned by the conflict, Bethany appeared in the doorway. Her timing was too perfect to be coincidental. She'd been listening, waiting for her cue to enter. "Oh, I didn't realize you were here, Marisa," she said with fake surprise. "Are you upsetting Mom and Dad again?" "We're discussing the inheritance situation," I said directly, "including the additional $25,000 they gave you on top of grandmother's bequest." Bethany's eyes widened in practiced shock. "Additional money? I had no idea it was that much." "Mom, Dad, you didn't have to do that. I'm sure Marisa needs support too with her. What is it you do again? Graphics drawings. The calculated diminishment of my career from someone who'd received my business card dozens of times, who'd attended my gallery showings, who knew exactly what I did, revealed her true nature. This wasn't ignorance. It was malice wrapped in a sorority girl's smile. She runs a successful design firm. Mitchell's voice came from behind me. He'd arrived, after all, unable to let me face this alone. Which you know since you tried to poach her biggest client last month. The room went silent. Bethany's mask slipped for just a moment before she recovered. I network with lots of people. If Marisa's clients choose to explore other options, that's business. But the truth was worse. She'd actively told my client that I was unstable, unreliable, that my family was concerned about my mental health. Only the client's loyalty and direct conversation with me had saved that contract. Is that what you call telling people I'm mentally unstable networking? I asked, watching our parents for any reaction to this revelation. They exchanged glances but said nothing, their silence speaking volumes. Grace finally stood, her posture rigid with indignation. I won't have you attacking your sister in our home. Bethany has worked hard for everything she has. If you spent less time being jealous and more time improving yourself, maybe you'd be happier. Improving myself. The laugh that escaped me was bitter. I've spent my entire life trying to earn a fraction of the love you freely give her. I've exceeded every goal overcome, every obstacle succeeded despite your constant undermining, and it's never enough because I'm not Bethany. Robert's face flushed red. Your sister doesn't complain. She doesn't make scenes. She doesn't turn family gatherings into therapy sessions. Maybe that's why she's easier to support. The truth finally emerged, raw and undeniable. I wasn't loved less because of my actions or choices. I was loved less because I existed as myself instead of as another version of Bethany. Every difference was a flaw. Every independent thought was rebellion. Every success that didn't mirror hers was meaningless. Tessa's text arrived at the perfect moment. Heard about what Bethany's been saying at the country club. Screenshots attached. You need to see this. I glanced at my phone to see messages where Bethany called me, the family disappointment joked about my delusions of grandeur, and suggested I might have a personality disorder that made me impossible to love. The final manipulation came as I prepared to leave. Bethany stepped forward, placing a concerned hand on my arm. Maybe you should talk to someone, Marisa. This anger, this paranoia about the family, it's not healthy. We all want what's best for you, but you make it so hard to help you. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced that I almost doubted myself. Almost. But Mitchell's steady presence behind me, the evidence on my phone, the years of documented slights and sabotage, all reinforced the truth. This wasn't my mental health crisis. This was theirs. As we left, Grace called out one final blow. If you can't be happy for your sister's blessings, perhaps you need to examine why you're so full of hatred. We've given you everything we could. It's not our fault, it's never enough for you. Everything they could. $4,000 versus $45,000. Lies to my grandmother versus truth. Sabotage versus support. Mockery versus praise. If this was everything they could give me, then I needed nothing from them at all. The drive home with Mitchell was quiet, but his hand never left mine. You know what needs to happen now, he said softly. It wasn't a question. The evidence was overwhelming, the pattern undeniable, the toxicity unbearable. But I still wasn't ready. There was one more family gathering, one more chance for them to see what they were destroying. That chance would become the night I finally understood that some families aren't broken by accident. Some are carefully constructed to have heroes and villains, golden children, and scapegoats. And once you're cast in your role, no achievement, no pleading, no evidence will change the script. The only power lies in refusing to play your part. The text from Aunt Diane came 3 days after the confrontation. Can we meet? There's more you need to know about your grandmother's will. Bring Mitchell. You'll need support for this. We met at a small restaurant 2 towns over, far from any chance family encounters. Diane looked older than her 60 years, worn down by decades of keeping secrets that weren't hers to bear. I've watched this happen for too long, she began, sliding a folder across the table. I kept quiet to preserve family peace, but there's no peace in injustice. Your grandmother's original will, before your parents got involved, tells a very different story. The documents she'd photocopied from grandmother's attorney painted a picture of deliberate manipulation. Grandmother had initially planned to leave me not just the house, but the bulk of her savings. Her handwritten notes in the margins explained why Marisa has shown true family devotion. She loves not for gain, but from the heart. The house should go to someone who'll fill it with the same warmth she brought to my final years. Your parents spent months convincing her otherwise, Diane continued. They told her you were financially reckless, that you'd probably quit your business on a whim, that you had a history of starting things and not finishing them. Complete fabrications, but your grandmother was medicated vulnerable. They brought Bethany to visit during those conversations, had her play the devoted granddaughter while painting you as unstable. Mitchell's hand tightened on mine as Diane revealed more evidence. Email printouts between my parents discussing strategy. We need to protect Mother's assets from Marisa's impulsiveness. One read. Another detailed their plan to ensure Bethany received the majority to maintain family stability. They'd conspired for months, turning my grandmother against me while I sat by her bedside reading her favorite books. But the conspiracy went deeper than inheritance theft. Diane had documented years of systematic undermining. The family reunion where they told everyone I dropped out of college when I'd actually graduated early. The Christmas dinner where they announced Bethany's engagement while deliberately scheduling it during my gallery opening, ensuring I'd miss my own professional milestone. The accidental failure to invite me to cousin Rachel's wedding later, blamed on a lost invitation they never sent. There's a pattern, Diane said, spreading out a timeline she'd created. Every time you achieved something significant, they manufactured a crisis or celebration for Bethany to overshadow it. Your business launch coincided with Bethany's sudden need for emergency dental surgery they had to fund. Your first major client win happened the same week they threw Bethany a surprise appreciation party for passing the bar exam 2 years after the fact. The evidence of calculated sabotage made my stomach churn. This wasn't favoritism born of personality differences or unconscious bias. This was deliberate strategic diminishment of one child to elevate another. But why? What had I done to deserve this treatment from birth? Your mother never wanted 2 children, Diane said quietly, answering my unspoken question. She was furious when she got pregnant with you. Bethany was supposed to be the only one, the perfect daughter they could shape and control. You were the accident that disrupted their plans, and they've punished you for existing ever since. Tessa arrived halfway through our meal, carrying her own evidence. I've been screenshot everything from the country club's social media, she said, pulling out her phone. Bethany's been building a narrative about you for years. The posts were damning. Bethany publicly discussing her mentally unstable sister, asking for prayers for her troubled sibling, suggesting I suffered from jealousy disorders and attention-seeking behavior. She's been poisoning professional relationships too, Tessa continued. Remember when you lost the Henderson account last year? Bethany had lunch with Mary Henderson the week before, told her you were having a breakdown, that your family was considering an intervention. Mary felt too uncomfortable to continue the relationship. The depth of betrayal left me breathless. Every professional setback I'd attributed to bad luck or poor timing had been orchestrated by my own family. My sister hadn't just basked in favoritism. She'd actively worked to ensure I stayed beneath her, using our parents' bias as a weapon to destroy opportunities before I could grasp them. Mitchell had been researching legal options while listening. "This goes beyond emotional abuse," he said. "They've committed fraud, defamation, tortious interference with business relationships. You could sue Marisa. There's enough evidence here for multiple civil cases." But legal action felt hollow. What court could restore the relationship I'd never had? What settlement could buy back the mother who'd never loved me? Or the father who saw me as a mistake to be managed? Money wasn't the point. The point was the 3 decades of gaslighting that made me question my own worth, achievements, and right to exist. Diane revealed one final piece of information that changed everything. "Your parents are planning to exclude you from the family trust entirely." I overheard them discussing it with their lawyer last week. "They're claiming you're estranged by choice, that you've rejected family values. Bethany's children will inherit everything while you're written off as the ungrateful daughter who abandoned them." "When is this happening?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "The documents are being signed after Bethany's promotion celebration next week. They wanted it done before the holidays' clean break for the new year. You were never supposed to know until it was irreversible." The promotion celebration. Of course. Another manufactured achievement to celebrate while secretly finalizing my complete disinheritance. The cruelty was breathtaking in its efficiency. Smile for the cameras while signing away your daughter's birthright. Toast success while ensuring failure. Play happy family while excising the inconvenient member. "There's something else," Tessa said hesitantly. "Derek's been telling people you made a pass at him, that you're jealous of Bethany's marriage and trying to break them up. He's warning men at the club to stay away from you, saying you're desperate and predatory." The lies multiplied like cancer cells, each one designed to isolate me further. Professional sabotage, personal defamation, financial manipulation, social destruction. This wasn't a family. It was a carefully coordinated campaign to erase me while maintaining plausible deniability. After all, who would believe the bitter, jealous sister over the successful, stable family unit? "You have to leave," Diane said firmly. "Not just the family, but this town. They won't stop until you're completely destroyed, and staying gives them ammunition. Every interaction becomes evidence of your instability. Every protest proves your jealousy. Every tear confirms your weakness. The only way to win this game is to stop playing." But I had one more move to make. The promotion celebration would be their ultimate triumph. Bethany elevated me, disinherited the narrative complete. They expected me to either skip it in defeat or attend in desperate hope. They didn't expect me to come prepared to document their finale performance, to gather the last evidence I needed to walk away forever.
"I'll go to the celebration," I announced, surprising everyone. "Not to reconcile, not to beg, but to witness. They want to erase me, fine, but I'll make sure I have proof of who they really are before I disappear from their lives." Mitchell started to protest, but I cut him off. "I need to see it to hear them say it. No more doubting myself, no more wondering if I misunderstood. I need to watch them choose her one last time, knowingly, deliberately, with full awareness of what they're doing. Then I can leave without looking back." The plan formed quickly. I'd attend the celebration, stay long enough to witness their truth, document what I needed, then leave on my own terms. Not in anger or tears, but with the cold clarity of someone who finally understood their worth existed entirely outside their family's ability to see it. The celebration would be their victory lap. It would also be my liberation ceremony, though they wouldn't know it until they woke to find me gone along with any power they'd ever held over me.
Bethany's promotion celebration was scheduled for a Saturday evening at my parents' house. The invitation came through Grace, dripping with false inclusion. We hope you can set aside your recent negativity to support your sister's wonderful achievement. The promotion itself was suspect, a lateral move at best, but in our family mythology, Bethany's every breath was worthy of celebration. I arrived precisely on time, dressed professionally, but not provocatively, giving them no ammunition for criticism. Mitchell waited in the car, ready for my signal. I'd sewn a small recording device into my clutch legal in our one-party consent state, determined to capture whatever truths emerged from their wine-loosened tongues. The house overflowed with extended family, and my parents' social circle all gathered to worship at the altar of Bethany's mediocrity. A banner reading "Congratulations to our star" hung across the living room, accompanied by a photo display of Bethany's achievements, real and imagined. I noticed my image had been cropped or removed from every family photo, a petty erasure that no longer surprised me. Marisa decided to join us after all. Grace announced to nearby guests, her tone suggesting I'd done something magnanimous by attending my own sister's party. We're hoping she's in a better mood tonight. The preset narrative established I was already the difficult one the potential troublemaker graciously allowed into the celebration. Bethany held court in the center of the room, Derek by her side, regaling admirers with tales of her professional triumph. From what I could gather, she'd been moved from one filing position to another with a title change, but no salary increase. Yet to hear her tell it, she'd been hand-selected by senior partners for greater responsibilities, a rising star in the legal firmament. I mingled, carefully avoiding confrontation while observing the dynamics I'd been blind to for years. Every conversation eventually circled back to Bethany's brilliance, my parents steering discussions with practiced ease. When Great Aunt Margaret asked about my business, Grace quickly interjected, "Marisa does some computer things. Nothing as impressive as Bethany's legal career, but it keeps her busy." The formal toast came after dinner. Robert stood at the head of the table, champagne glass, raised, his face glowing with paternal pride. Tonight we celebrate not just a promotion, but a journey of excellence. Bethany has always been exceptional, from her first steps to her law degree to this newest achievement. She represents everything we hoped for in a daughter. He paused, eyes misting with emotion. Grace and I often say we've been blessed with one perfect child. Bethany embodies our values, our dreams, our legacy. She's not just our daughter. She's our greatest achievement, the proof that we succeeded as parents. To Bethany, who makes us proud every single day. The room erupted in applause while I sat frozen. One perfect child. Their greatest achievement. The proof they succeeded. 30 years of rejection condensed into a single toast, witnessed by 50 people who saw nothing wrong with parents declaring one child perfect, while the other sat at the same table, erased from existence. Grace stood next her contribution, even more cutting. When people ask about our family, we always lead with Bethany. Her accomplishments speak for themselves. She's the daughter every parent dreams of, successful, married to wonderful Derek, soon to give us grandchildren who will undoubtedly inherit her excellence. We couldn't be prouder of the woman she's become. Still no acknowledgement of my presence, no mention of 2 daughters, no pretense of equal love. I'd become grammatically singular, linguistically erased from the family unit. The guests smiled and nodded, either oblivious to the cruelty or complicit in it. Only Aunt Diane met my eyes, her face tight with suppressed anger. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing distance from the suffocating adoration. But the universe had one more gift of clarity to offer. The bathroom shared a wall with the kitchen, and through the thin partition, I heard my mother, father, and Bethany in private conversation, their voices clear and unguarded. "At least we got one right," Grace said with a heavy sigh. I still don't understand where we went wrong with Marisa. You didn't go wrong, Bethany reassured her. Some people are just born difficult. I've tried to help her, but she's so jealous, so angry all the time. It's exhausting being her sister. We've given her every opportunity, Robert added. The same schools, the same resources, the same love. But she rejected all of it, chose to be the perpetual victim. Thank God we have you, Bethany. You're proof we're good parents. About the trust documents, Bethany said, her voice dropping lower. You're sure she won't contest it? She won't even know until it's done, Grace replied. The lawyer said as long as she's not formally notified before the signing, she has no grounds to interfere. By New Year's, everything will be properly structured for your family's future. She is family, Bethany said with false concern. I don't want her to suffer. Robert laughed bitterly. She's made her choices. Running that silly business instead of getting a real job dating that Mitchell character who enables her delusions, rejecting our guidance at every turn. If she ends up with nothing, it's her own fault. Besides, Grace added, she was always the spare. We needed a backup in case something happened to you, but once you thrived, she became unnecessary. Some children are meant to shine. Others are meant to fade into the background. Natural selection, really. The spare. Unnecessary. Meant to fade. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle the sound of my breaking heart. This wasn't favoritism or unconscious bias. This was explicit acknowledgement that I'd been born as insurance kept, as obligation, and discarded as inconvenience once the preferred model proved viable. I should get back, Bethany said. Don't want Marisa getting suspicious. She's probably recording everything. You know how paranoid she is. The irony of her accurate guess while dismissing it as paranoia almost made me laugh. Let her record, Grace said dismissively. Who'd believe the bitter sister over successful, stable Bethany? She spent years building a reputation as the family problem. Even if she had evidence, people would assume she doctored it. That's the beauty of consistent narrative. Once everyone believes she's unstable, everything she does proves it. I slipped back to this party, my phone vibrating with Mitchell's concerned texts. But I needed to see this through, to witness the final act of this 3-decade performance. I found my seat as Derek stood to make his own toast, his contribution focused on Bethany's role as perfect wife and future mother. Behind every great woman is a supportive family, he said, gesturing to my parents. Grace and Robert raised a daughter who knows her worth, who doesn't settle for mediocrity, who understands that success requires focus and dedication. Not everyone in this room can say the same. His eyes found mine for a brief moment, the sneer barely concealed. The implications hung heavy in the air. I settled for mediocrity. I lacked focus and dedication. I didn't know my worth. The audience absorbed these subtle daggers, filing them away in their mental catalogs of family dynamics. Poor Bethany saddled with an unsuccessful sister. Lucky Grace and Robert. At least they had one good daughter. The evening continued its predictable course. Bethany opened gifts, each one met with theatrical gratitude. My parents presented her with a check, the amount carefully visible to nearby guests. $10,000 for a promotion that didn't include a raise. Another investment in the golden child while the spare sat unacknowledged. As the party wound down, I made my rounds, saying polite goodbyes that would serve as unrecognized farewells. Aunt Diane held me longer than necessary, whispering, "Do what you need to do." Others offered vacant smiles and empty pleasantries, already forgetting my presence before I'd left the room. My final stop was my parents. Grace barely glanced up from her conversation. "Drive safely," she said absently, the same words she'd offer a delivery driver. Robert didn't acknowledge my departure at all, too busy discussing Bethany's future prospects with a colleague. But Bethany intercepted me at the door, her smile sharp as glass. "Thanks for coming, Marisa. I know it must be hard watching everyone celebrate my success when you're still struggling to find your place. But don't give up. Maybe someday you'll have something worth celebrating too." The cruelty was so casual, so practiced that it almost felt like kindness. She'd perfected the art of wounded sympathy, the concerned sister worried about her lesser sibling. Anyone watching would see supportive encouragement rather than calculated demolition. This was her gift, the ability to wound while wearing a halo. I smiled back, my first genuine smile of the evening. "You're right, Bethany. Someday I'll have something worth celebrating. Something real, something earned, something that doesn't require destroying others to achieve." "Enjoy your party." Her facade cracked slightly at my calm response. She'd expected tears, anger, or desperate attempts at connection. She hadn't expected serenity from someone who'd finally accepted the truth and found it liberating rather than devastating. I walked out of my childhood home knowing I'd never return, carrying with me the recorded evidence of their calculated cruelty, and the absolute certainty that my worth had never depended on their ability to see it. Mitchell waited in the car engine running. "How was it?" he asked gently. "Clarifying," I said, pulling out my phone to save the audio files to multiple clouds. "I have everything I need. They gave me the greatest gift tonight. They showed me exactly who they are, who they've always been, and who they'll always be. And more importantly, they showed me who I'm not." We drove away from this house where I'd never been wanted, from the family who'd never seen me, from the life that had never fit. In 6 hours, I'd return one final time, not to beg for inclusion, but to take my freedom. The 3 a.m. departure wasn't running away. It was running towards something better, something real, something mine. At 2:30 a.m., I stood in my apartment surrounded by boxes containing the life I was about to leave behind. Mitchell had stayed awake with me, helping sort possessions into categories: essential storage, donate, and destroy. The destroy pile contained every family photo where I'd been relegated to the edges. Every birthday card with perfunctory messages. Every gift that came with conditions or comparisons. "You don't have to do this tonight," Mitchell said, though we both knew I did. The revelation required immediate action, like cauterizing a wound before infection could spread. Waiting would only invite doubt, second-guessing, or worse, hope that things could change. Hope had been my enemy for 30 years. Tonight, clarity was my friend. I'd written the letter earlier, each word chosen carefully. Not a manifesto of grievances, but a simple statement of truth. I included transcripts of the recorded conversations, screenshots of Bethany's social media defamation, documentation of the financial disparities. Not to change their minds, they were incapable of that, but to prevent future gaslighting. When they claimed confusion about my departure, when they painted themselves as bewildered victims, the evidence would exist. By 3 a.m., I was parked outside my parents' house. The same house where I'd been the spare child, the backup plan, the unnecessary second. Every window was dark, the occupants sleeping peacefully, secure in their cruelty. I used my key one last time, moving silently through rooms that had never truly been home. I placed the letter on the kitchen table where my father took his morning coffee. Beside it, I left my house key and the pearl necklace my grandmother had worn, the one they'd given to Bethany despite grandmother's wishes. Let them explain to others why I'd returned their symbols of belonging. Let them craft stories about my ingratitude while holding evidence of their betrayal. The floorboard creaked as I headed toward the door, and I froze, waiting. But no one stirred. Even in potential discovery, I remained invisible in this house, a ghost haunting rooms where my presence had never truly registered. I slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness, pulling the door closed on 30 years of rejection. The drive to Mitchell's apartment took 15 minutes that felt like a lifetime. Each mile increased the distance between who I'd been and who I could become. The girl who painted elaborate decorations for parents who barely noticed. The woman who built a business they diminished. The daughter who loved despite never being loved in return. I left her in that house with the letter a memorial to efforts that were never going to be enough. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Grace's number appeared first, followed immediately by Robert's. I'd anticipated this had already blocked them on social media, but left phone communication open temporarily to document their reactions. The voicemails came in rapid succession, each more revealing than the last.
Marisa, this is ridiculous.
How dare you leave such a letter full of lies and manipulation? Call me immediately. Grace's first message focused on her indignation rather than concern.
Your mother is hysterical. You've ruined her morning with your dramatics. This is exactly why we've had to be careful with you. You're unstable.
Robert's contribution confirming that even my departure was about them.
Are you having a breakdown? Should we call the police for a wellness check? This isn't normal behavior, sneaking into our house at night like a criminal.
Grace again already crafting the narrative of my mental instability. Bethany's call came an hour later after my parents had undoubtedly briefed her. Marisa, I'm shocked by these accusations. Recording private conversations. Making wild claims about sabotage. You need help, serious psychological help. I'm willing to pay for therapy if you'll admit you fabricated this evidence. The offer of therapy in exchange for admitting I'd lied was particularly inspired. Accept help for the mental illness of telling the truth. Admit fabrication to receive the support they'd never offered when I actually needed it. Even in crisis, the manipulation continued, evolved, adapted to maintain their narrative supremacy. But the real revelation came through Tessa, who'd been monitoring social media. They're already spinning it, she reported. Bethany posted about her concern for your mental health crisis. Your mom's telling everyone you've had a breakdown, that they're trying to get you help, but you're refusing. The comments are flooded with sympathy for them dealing with such a difficult family member. The speed of their response impressed me. Within hours of discovery, they'd mobilized a full propaganda campaign. Poor Grace and Robert saddled with an unstable daughter. Sweet Bethany worried about her troubled sister. The narrative was so smooth, so practiced, that I wondered how many times they'd rehearsed this scenario, preparing for the day I might break free. Then the tide turned. Aunt Diane, fed up with decades of complicity through silence, posted her own response. She shared photos from family events where my achievements had been ignored, documented instances of financial favoritism. She'd witnessed, testified to conversations where my parents explicitly stated their preference for Bethany. She ended with a simple statement. Some families create scapegoats to avoid examining their own failures. I'm done enabling this one. The extended family erupted. Cousins who'd noticed but never spoken up began sharing their own observations. I always wondered why Marisa's graduation wasn't celebrated. Remember when they forgot to tell her about the family reunion? Bethany used to brag about being the favorite. The carefully maintained facade cracked under the weight of collective memory. Mitchell's parents, who'd witnessed enough dysfunction during joint dinners, offered their own statement of support. Professional colleagues who'd heard Bethany's undermining comments came forward. Clients I'd worked with expressed shock at learning about the sabotage attempts. My story, gaslit into silence for 3 decades, suddenly had witnesses, supporters, believers. Grace's voicemails shifted from anger to panic. People are saying terrible things about us. You need to tell them it's not true. We're your parents. We love you. How can you let strangers attack us like this? The woman who'd publicly erased me from existence now demanded I protect her reputation. Robert tried negotiation. Let's discuss this like adults. We may have made mistakes, but airing family business publicly helps no one. Come home and we'll work through this together. The man who'd called me unnecessary wanted to work through it together, but only to contain the damage. Bethany went silent after her initial call, too busy playing damage control, as her carefully cultivated image crumbled. Derek, it turned out, had questions about stories that didn't align with what he'd observed. The perfect daughter narrative required an imperfect sister as contrast. Without me to villainize, Bethany's ordinary reality became visible. By evening, my story had traveled beyond family circles. A local blogger picked it up as an example of toxic family dynamics. My phone buzzed with messages from strangers sharing similar experiences, thanking me for the courage to leave, offering support and validation. The girl who'd been told she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too difficult, discovered an entire community of people who'd heard the same lies. But the most important message came from my biggest client, Sandra Chen. I need to apologize. Bethany told me you were struggling with mental health issues, suggested I might want to reconsider our contract. I almost believed her. Seeing the truth now, I'm horrified that I nearly participated in this sabotage. Your work has been exceptional, and I'd like to discuss expanding our partnership. The professional opportunities that followed were almost anticlimactic. 3 new clients reached out within days, drawn by both sympathy and curiosity. My story of overcoming family sabotage to build a successful business resonated with other entrepreneurs who'd faced similar obstacles. The very visibility my family had tried to prevent became my greatest marketing tool. A week after my departure, Grace made one final attempt. She appeared at Mitchell's apartment looking haggard, clutching a gift bag. "I've brought some of your things," she said when Mitchell answered. "Things you forgot." The bag contained random items clearly grabbed in desperation, nothing of actual importance. This was about forcing contact, not returning possessions. Mitchell stood firm in the doorway, refusing her entry. "Marisa will contact you if and when she's ready. Please respect her boundaries." Boundaries. Grace's composure cracked. "I'm her mother. I have a right to see my daughter to explain, to fix this misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I said, appearing behind Mitchell. "You said I was the spare, unnecessary, born as insurance. Those were your words, not misinterpretations. You knew exactly who I was and chose to diminish me anyway. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice you made every day for 30 years. Her face cycled through emotions, finally settling on the one I'd seen most often: disappointment. "You always were too sensitive, taking everything so personally, holding grudges. Bethany would never do this to us." "You're right," I agreed. Bethany would never do this, because Bethany was never pushed to this. Bethany was never told she was unnecessary. Bethany was never sabotaged, undermined, erased. Bethany would never do this because you never gave her a reason to. Lucky Bethany. Lucky you. I closed the door on her protests, on 30 years of gaslighting on the family that had never wanted me anyway. The sound echoed with finality, a punctuation mark on a sentence that had run too long. Outside Grace's car eventually pulled away, taking with it the last expectation that I'd return to play my assigned role. That night, surrounded by boxes in Mitchell's apartment, I felt something I hadn't experienced before: wholeness. Not happiness yet, that would take time. Not triumph, the losses were too profound for celebration. But wholeness, the sensation of being complete, without requiring external validation from people incapable of providing it. My phone lit up with messages of support, business opportunities, connections with chosen family who saw my worth immediately. The 3 a.m. girl who'd crept out of an unwelcoming house had become someone else by sunset, visible, valued, free. The inheritance I'd lost in dollars had been repaid in liberation. And unlike money, no one could ever take this freedom away. The first months after leaving were harder than I'd anticipated. Grief comes in waves, and mine crashed over me at unexpected moments. Not grief for the family I'd left, but for the family I'd never had. The phantom pain of relationships that existed only in my imagination. The loving parents and supportive sister who lived in the alternate universe where I was deemed worthy of unconditional love. Mitchell held me through the hardest nights when the programming of 30 years insisted I was wrong to leave, selfish to protect myself, dramatic for refusing to accept crumbs disguised as love. His presence anchored me to reality when gaslighting tried to creep back in. "You didn't imagine it," he'd remind me. I was there. I saw it. The recordings exist. Your pain is real and valid. Therapy helped untangle the web of manipulation that had shaped my worldview. Dr. Martinez specialized in family scapegoat dynamics, and our sessions revealed patterns I'd never recognized. The way I apologized constantly, even for existing. How I overperformed in every area, desperately seeking approval that would never come. The panic I felt when anyone showed genuine appreciation, waiting for the catch, the comparison, the reminder that I wasn't Bethany. "You were raised in a psychological war zone," she explained during one breakthrough session. "Constantly under attack, never knowing when the next assault would come. Your nervous system is still in survival mode, waiting for threats that no longer exist. Healing means teaching your body and mind that you're finally safe." My business flourished without the constant drain of family sabotage. The contract expansions Sandra Chen had promised materialized into a partnership that tripled my revenue. Word spread organically about my work ethic and creativity, untainted by Bethany's poison whispers. Clients appreciated dealing with someone who delivered excellence without drama, unaware that the drama had never been mine to begin with. 6 months after my departure, Bethany reached out through LinkedIn of all places. Her message was a masterclass in manipulation, expressing concern for my well-being while subtly threatening consequences. "I hope you're getting the help you need. Mom and Dad are heartbroken. The family's reputation has suffered tremendously from your accusations. Perhaps we should meet to discuss how to repair the damage before it becomes irreversible." I screenshot the message, adding it to my collection of evidence, but didn't respond. The threat was clear beneath the false concern. Return to the fold. Recant your truth or face continued consequences. But what consequences could they impose that were worse than 30 years of psychological torture? They'd already taken everything they could, except the one thing that mattered: my sense of self. The universe has a sense of humor, though. Bethany's perfect life began unraveling without a scapegoat to absorb the family dysfunction. Derek filed for divorce 8 months after my departure, citing irreconcilable differences that sources suggested included Bethany's pathological need for attention and her inability to maintain relationships without a comparative victim. Without me to look better than she had to stand on her own merits and found them insufficient. Her promotion, the one celebrated with such fanfare, resulted in increased scrutiny that revealed her actual work performance. Turns out, being the golden child doesn't translate to professional competence. Within a year, she was quietly transferred to a position with less responsibility, her career trajectory stalling as reality replaced family mythology. My parents fared no better. Their social circle, once sympathetic to their plight of the difficult daughter, began questioning narratives that didn't align with observable reality. Grace's position on the library board became untenable when fellow members recalled how she'd excluded me from family literacy events while praising Bethany for simply showing up. Robert's golf buddies grew tired of hearing about ungrateful Marisa while watching Bethany's life implode despite every advantage. The family Christmas photo they posted showed three people trying too hard to appear happy. Bethany's smile looked forced, her designer dress unable to disguise the strain. My parents flanked her like guards, protecting a prisoner, their faces showing the exhaustion of maintaining a facade without their designated problem to blame. The comments were telling polite but distant the community stepping back from a family revealed as toxic. Aunt Diane became my bridge to extended family worth knowing. She hosted alternative gatherings for relatives who'd also suffered under the golden child/scapegoat dynamic. Cousins I'd barely known shared stories of being marginalized for failing to worship Bethany adequately. We formed our own family unit, bonded by survival rather than blood, choosing connection over obligation. 1 year after my 3 a.m. departure, Mitchell proposed during a sunrise hike. He'd chosen the location carefully, a mountaintop where we could see for miles, symbolic of the new horizons available when you leave toxic valleys behind. His proposal included promises I'd never heard before: to see me clearly, to celebrate my achievements without comparison, to love me for exactly who I was rather than who I could pretend to be. The wedding planning triggered unexpected emotions. Every decision reminded me of the family who wouldn't participate. Then I realized the gift in their absence. No Grace to criticize my choices. No Bethany to make it about her. No Robert to remind everyone that Bethany's wedding was better. I could plan a celebration of love without navigating landmines of comparison and competition. My chosen family filled every role beautifully. Aunt Diane walked me down the aisle, tears streaming as she whispered, "Your grandmother would be so proud." Tessa served as maid of honor, having witnessed the journey from invisible daughter to radiant bride. Mitchell's parents embraced me as their own, providing the parental love I'd been denied. The ceremony reflected our values: intimate, authentic, focused on connection rather than performance. Grace sent a wedding gift through Diane, an expensive crystal vase with a card claiming they wished me well. I donated it to charity, letting someone who needed beauty in their life benefit from their guilt offering. The card went into the evidence file, proof that they knew about the wedding they weren't invited to, preventing future claims of being excluded without notice. Bethany attempted contact, once more appearing at my office with what she clearly imagined was an olive branch. "I'm getting help," she announced, as if her therapy journey should automatically grant her access to my life. I realize now how unfair things were. I want to make amends. Amends require acknowledgement of specific harm. I replied, maintaining professional distance. "What exactly are you apologizing for?" Her face went through familiar calculations. "For not being a better sister. For not standing up for you more. For benefiting from mom and dad's preferences." Still minimizing. Preferences, not abuse. Benefiting from not actively participating in. Not being better, rather than being actively harmful. This wasn't amends. It was reputation management. She needed the estranged sister narrative resolved to rebuild her image. My forgiveness was just another resource she felt entitled to extract. "I wish you well in your healing journey." I said the same words I'd use with any stranger. "But that journey doesn't include access to me. Please don't come here again." The extinction burst that followed was predictable. Calls from flying monkeys insisting family was forever. Social media posts about forgiveness and redemption. Anonymous reviews attacking my business. I weathered each assault with the serenity of someone who'd survived worse and emerged stronger. My clients rallied around me, my chosen family provided shields of support, and eventually the attacks faded into background noise. 2 years post-departure, I received word that my parents were selling the family home. The market had shifted their retirement plans, requiring downsizing. The house where I'd been unwelcome would shelter another family, hopefully one that treasured all their children equally. I felt nothing beyond mild curiosity, the emotional attachment severed along with the toxic relationships it represented. The business expanded internationally, requiring travel that filled my passport with stamps of adventures they'd never imagined for me. Each success felt sweeter for being achieved without their support, proving that their evaluation of my worth had always been wrong. I spoke at conferences about entrepreneurship and overcoming adversity, carefully omitting family details while sharing universal truths about believing in yourself when others won't. The speaking engagements led to a book deal. My editor suggested including the family story, but I declined. They'd taken enough of my energy. The book focused on building success through authenticity, creating chosen family, and recognizing your worth independent of others' opinions. It resonated with thousands who'd walked similar paths, proving that my story wasn't unique, just rarely told. Success, I learned, is the best revenge, only if you're not pursuing it for revenge. My achievements weren't designed to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. Every milestone celebrated with chosen family felt more meaningful than any validation they could have offered. I built a life so full of genuine love and authentic connection that their absence became irrelevant rather than painful. 3 years after leaving, I established the Phoenix Foundation, a scholarship program for scapegoated siblings pursuing education or entrepreneurship without family support. The first recipient was a young woman whose story mirrored mine, brilliant and driven but deemed less than by parents who preferred her brother. Watching her accept the scholarship with tears of recognition and relief, I understood that my pain had been transformed into purpose. The Foundation's annual gala became a gathering of survivors and supporters. Aunt Diane served on the board, using her retirement to advocate for forgotten children. Tessa managed social media, sharing resources for those still trapped in toxic family systems. Mitchell designed the website, his technical skills supporting the mission of making invisible people seen. During the third gala, someone mentioned seeing my parents at a restaurant dining alone, on what would have been a family celebration in another life. They looked diminished, the source said, going through motions without enthusiasm. Bethany lived in another state now, their perfect daughter seeking distance from the parents who destroyed one child to elevate another. I felt compassion for the first time. Not forgiveness that wasn't mine to give for harm they'd never acknowledged. Not reconciliation, you can't rebuild what was never built. But compassion for people so broken they'd needed to break others to feel whole. They'd created their own prison walls built from lies and favoritism, and now they served life sentences in solitary confinement of their own making. The final contact came through a lawyer. My parents were updating their will and required my signature acknowledging I'd been notified, but excluded. The document was clinical in its cruelty, listing Bethany as sole beneficiary, while noting my existence only as a legal formality. I signed without emotion, returning proof of their final rejection with the same energy I'd sign any business document. That night, Mitchell found me on our deck watching stars invisible from my childhood home's light pollution. "Any regrets?" he asked, knowing the answer but offering space for complicated feelings. "None," I said, meaning it completely. They gave me the greatest gift possible. They showed me exactly what love wasn't, making it impossible to mistake anything less for the real thing. Every relationship in my life now is chosen, cherished, and mutual. I didn't lose a family. I escaped a hostage situation. The stars shone brighter, as if acknowledging truth spoken into darkness. Below our home glowed with warmth that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice. Inside, evidence of the life I'd built without them filled every corner. awards they'd never celebrate, friends they'd never meet, love they'd never understand. I thought about the girl who'd crept out at 3 a.m., carrying nothing but determination to find something better. She'd had no idea how much better it could be, how love felt when freely given, how success tasted when earned despite sabotage, how peace sounded when the war finally ended. That girl had saved herself by refusing to accept that others' inability to love her defined her worthiness of love. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property or family heirlooms. Sometimes it's the freedom to discover who you are without the weight of who others need you to be. They gave Bethany $45,000 and their approval. They gave me $4,000 and their rejection. But in the end, I received the better deal. Because you can spend money, but you can't spend freedom. You can lose approval, but you can't lose the knowledge that you were always enough. The 3 a.m. girl had walked out with nothing and gained everything. The family that couldn't love her had taught her to love herself. And that more than any inheritance they could have offered was the fortune that would last a lifetime. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between toxic family and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you won't miss future stories about overcoming adversity and finding your chosen family. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, sometimes the best family is the one you choose for yourself. Until next time, keep choosing yourself. You're worth it.